Now that we're finally getting into what's going on with Bryan Walsh, I want to give you guys a little bit of a background with the whole Bryan Walsh story. So what we're going to do is we're going to check out a video here from NBC News 10 in Boston, find out what's going on with jury selection, find out what's going to happen to Bryan Walsh moving forward, and then we'll get a little bit of a background story of how we got here in the first place. Check this out.
We are 2 days away from the start of the Bryan Walsh murder trial. He is accused of killing his wife. That happened 2 years ago. Now, Walsh has pleaded not guilty to all charges against him. Actually, last week, a judge found that he was competent to stand trial for those crimes.
And Walsh will be in court tomorrow for a final pretrial hearing before jury selection begins on Tuesday. And tonight, our Jericho Cotran spoke to our chief legal analyst about what to expect.
Here we go.
Yeah, we're expecting this to be another high-profile murder trial, garnering a lot of public attention, very similar to what we saw during the Karen Reed trial. I'm sure you remember the people that were packing the sidewalks as well as the streets. I spoke with our chief legal analyst, Michael Coyne, about the similarities between the two trials and what we can expect. Jury selection begins this week in the murder trial of Bryan Walsh, who is accused of murdering his wife, Anna Walsh. The Cohasset father faces charges for killing, dismembering, and discarding the body of his wife, Anna, 3 years ago around New Year's in 2023, but her remains were never found.
That's obviously an essential element of any homicide prosecution. It's usually the easiest element of any homicide prosecution, but without a body, it's a little more difficult.
Last week, a judge determined Walsh is able to stand trial following a competency evaluation at Bridgewater State Hospital.
He has a number of very important decisions to make, whether he wants to try and plea, whether he wants to testify, how he directs his defense. All of those things are essential to do as a defendant who's facing life imprisonment.
Oh, we have not talked about a plea. Do you all think Bryan Walsh should take a plea? Now, again, we saw with Karen Reed, people were saying, take the plea, they're going to get you. Based on what we saw in pretrial, in preliminary hearings, and even in opening statements. Then, of course, at a mistrial the first time, came back the second time, Karen Reed found not guilty other than OUI, right? Do you all think that Bryan Walsh should take a plea deal? From what I've seen so far with Bryan Walsh, it ain't looking great. But still, the burden of proof is on the state. We have to remember this throughout everything. Is someone buying a bunch of cleaning supplies, $400 worth of cleaning supplies, enough for you to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that they dismembered and hid the body of their spouse? We got to hear about motive. We got to hear about opportunity. There's so much information here that is unknown. But either way, let me know what y'all think about that in the comments in the chat too.
County Superior Court now expected to take center stage again, just months after the conclusion of the Karen Reed trial.
Well, I think like we saw in the Karen Reed case, where the investigators are out of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, that there is some real concern there now in the public and perhaps by members of the jury as to whether the investigation was conducted as professionally and as appropriately as it should have been.
Former Massachusetts State Trooper Michael Proctor served as the lead investigator during the Karen Reed case.
Yikes.
And was also involved with the investigation into Anna Walsh's disappearance.
It raises all of those issues again about his level of professionalism and did he rush to judgment in Karen Reed? Did he rush to judgment here? So that same type, some of that same evidence will be used here to try and create that reasonable doubt.
And we haven't found out yet, too, if Proctor is going to testify here. Wouldn't that be awkward if Proctor has to testify during this trial? Dang, man. Are we going to get a opinion on the husband text?
Same evidence will be used here to try and create that reasonable doubt.
And jury selection is expected to take about 2 weeks. And then after Thanksgiving, that's when we can expect to hear those testimonies, probably around that first week of December. But you're going to want to stay tuned here to NBC 10 Boston because we will be following this every step of the way. In Dedham, Jericho Cotran, NBC 10 Boston.
And we're going to be following that case, too, after Thanksgiving once jury selection takes place. Man, if Proctor testifies, that would be wild. So let's go over to Court TV. Now we're going to get more of an in-depth look at what's going on with this Bryan Walsh trial. Vinny's going to help us out and break down the entire story and some of the evidence we've seen so far. Here we go. Shout out to the dope intro.
And the subject of my investigation is the disappearance of Anna Walsh, the mother of 3 young boys. Investigators have not found her, but they believe they know what happened and who is responsible. Here's the story. Anna Walsh was born in Serbia in 1983. After graduating from a university in Belgrade, she eventually moved to the United States in 2005. She became a dual citizen. Anna worked in the hospitality industry at various hotels, and it was at one of those hotels where she met Bryan Walsh. In 2016, Bryan and Anna got married and started a family. Together, they were raising 3 young boys. In 2022, Anna obtained a position with a real estate company, which forced her to split time between her home with her family in Massachusetts and Washington, D.C. This move, along with Bryan's federal indictment related to an art scam, put a lot of strain on their relationship. Then, after spending New Year's having dinner with friends, Anna seemingly vanished. She was reported missing by her employer in D.C. and by Bryan on January 4th. Investigators suspected Bryan and ended up executing a search warrant which uncovered evidence they believe proves Bryan murdered and dismembered Anna, despite the fact that her remains have never been found. Bryan has been charged with Anna's murder and is locked up waiting for his trial. Think about this story and Anna Walsh, 3 young kids at home.
Dang.
Where did she go? You know, we've seen this fact pattern, unfortunately, several times before through the years here at Court TV. A couple with young children, and all of a sudden, someone goes missing. Usually it's the wife, the mom. So,
unfortunately,
why do prosecutors believe that Bryan Walsh could do this? Well, I want you to take a listen to the prosecutor at Bryan Walsh's arraignment, talking about Bryan and Anna and what was going through the mind of the accused killer.
In December of 2022, it had become evident that Mr. Walsh was suspecting his wife of having an affair. He was routinely visiting the Instagram page of one of her male friends, and on December 26th, his mother, with his input and direction, obtained and hired a private investigator to surveil Anna Walsh in Washington, D.C. On December 27th, the oldest son's iPad was used to research best states to get divorced in and worst states to get divorced in.
That's not great.
A private investigator suspected that something was happening here? That brings us to our first question in this investigation, and it's about the Walshes. What was going on in their relationship? And how would that be connected to any potential motive for murder? Joining me to help figure all this out, longtime reporter in Massachusetts at Boston 25 News, Bob Ward is with us, and the host of Talking Live and the Bite Size Podcast, a psychotherapist who wrote a book on killer spouses, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Great to have you both here. Before we dive fully into this, I just want to put one more thing out there. And this was the paramour, the alleged man that Anna was seeing, speaking with police. And this is January 7th, 2023. So it's about a week into the investigation. And you may recognize this name, Sergeant Y. Buchanan, which is Yuri Buchanan from the Karen Reed case. And Detective Lopes traveled to Washington, D.C. and spoke with attorneys that represent, and we've redacted the name of the alleged paramour, who resides in D.C. and is the most frequent contact with Anna on cell phone records in possession of investigators. So they're talking a lot on the phone. Statements to investigators is that he was in a dating relationship with Anna Walsh and had been for several months. The relationship became more serious over the past few months, and they had spent Thanksgiving together in Dublin and spent Christmas Eve together also. They were open about their relationship in Washington, D.C., and they had plans to celebrate the new year on January 4th, 2022, after she returned from Massachusetts.
Not great.
Okay, Bob Ward, it seems that this was a strained relationship, and a couple things in play, right? The fact she's got this new job out of town, and he's got this indictment.
Yeah, the indictment, you can't overstate that enough, as being a major role here in what was driving that wedge between them. He had the indictment for a federal indictment for selling fake Andy Warhol prints. He was looking at serious jail time, substantial fines.
Yeah.
You know, going back even further than that, he also had issues with his father, who passed away, and issues over his will. And it just financially, he presented as somebody other than who he was. So he presented as somebody who was well off and connected, when really he was just scrounging for money. This is according to the prosecution. And he was putting up this false front, and he could not afford the lifestyle that he tried to portray himself as having. But there was even trouble before that. Vinny, back in 2014, while they were still dating, she told police down in D.C. that he threatened to kill her and all of her friends, but she stayed with this guy. And, that relationship may have been open down in D.C., but it certainly was not up here in Massachusetts, where he was on house arrest, waiting sentencing for that federal case. And in December of 2022, he caught wind of what was really going on, and that sent all these events in motion.
All right, Doc.
And that, I think, is when it comes to motive and the means, this is going to be the toughest thing, because he was facing those federal charges before he allegedly murdered his wife, before his wife disappeared. So this guy was under a lot of pressure. He's looking at a lot of jail time already, and he had pled guilty to the federal charges in April 2021. Then you have his life spiraling out of control, and most likely looking at doing some significant jail time, being away from the kids. And then do you have a situation of, if I can't have her, nobody can have her? Find out maybe she's starting to move on because she knows things are getting ugly. Oh boy, Bryan, man, this is definitely going to be an interesting one. Again, y'all know we're going to be here to cover this thing from start to finish. So let me know what y'all think in the comments in the chat. Innocent to proven guilty, of course, but from what you've seen so far, what are you thinking about Bryan Walshe?